All right, so today, like I said, we're going to be talking about the study list. And we often say that this is the most underutilized feature in ARM, but it has a lot of power to it. So we really try to encourage everyone to learn more about it so you can utilize it when you're working with ARM. So what the study list is it's simply just an index list of your ARM files. It's not a storage device. So you can just view the ARM files that you've either created or opened. That's one of the common misperceptions about ARM, and especially when you open up ARM, the first thing that you see is that study list. And so some people think that all of our files are saved in that ARM system, but they're actually not. They're saved to either your hard drive on your computer, your network, or your cloud drive, wherever you have chosen to save those study files. And so the study list is just simply a view of those files. And this is just a quick way to see the different sections of the study list. So there are 5 different sections of the study list, and we will go through those. I'll jump into ARM and we will go through those, and I'll show you some examples and some different ways to use each of those 5 sections. So I am going to pull over my ARM. And so first, so the first section is the study grid, and that's the main grid down here at the bottom. This is the actual list of all ARM studies. So every protocol or trial that you've ever created or opened is going to be listed here. And you can see that there's several different columns of information. And that's all index pieces of information from your study files. And then over here to the right of that study grid is the selected study panel. And I'm actually going to make that a little bit bigger. And you can hide this if you want to see more of the columns in your study grid. You can use this little pin icon there, and you can hide it, and then you can bring it back up if you want to. And you can actually, and so this is just, it's a visualization of the protocol or the trial file that you have selected in the study grid. It's an easier way to visualize that file rather than having to scroll through a really long row in this study grid. So it's an easy way to just quickly look at the information that is in that study. And so you can see if I click a different study, that selected study panel will update. And so that's the bottom half here of the study list. The top half, there's 3 more sections, and we have, these are all of our tools to filter. So the main one here in the middle is the filter section, and all of these fields here in the filter section correspond with a column in the study grid here. And so you can see each of these fields, they have a gold box in them, and you can use that gold box to bring up all of the entries for that particular field in each of the studies that are in your study list, and you can use that to narrow down your search. Over on the left is the filter navigation bar. And so you can quickly navigate through the groups of the filters in the filter section, and there's lots of different columns of data, so that bar lets you jump around to the different sections of that filter. And then on the right over here is the quick filters panel. And so this is just some quick tools to help you speed up and enhance the filter section. So it allows you to apply additional filter options with just a single click. So for example, if I was looking for a trial, I can click on this trials button here, and it will bring up, it will narrow it down to only trial files. It won't display the protocol files anymore. And you can see just to the bottom of this quick filters is the active filters. And so that tells me how many studies are in my study list. So I have a total of 62 studies in my study list right now. And I have that trials quick filter applied. So the active filter here tells me that 45 of my 62 studies in the study list are trial files. And it is displaying active studies, and it's telling you the filter that I currently have applied, which is trials. And by active studies, what we mean is that it's just showing the studies that are active. Any studies that have been archived are not being shown right now in my study list. If you want to archive a study, you can just right-click and go to Archive File, and it will archive it for you. But if you wanted to bring back and have those archive files in your study list to search through, you can just click down here to the Include Archived Studies. If I click that off, you can see that first study, the AUDPC 1 that I archived, has disappeared now. But if I click that Include Archived Studies, it shows back up. All right, and then if at any time you want to clear your filter, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can either right-click and say Remove Filter, or you can go down here to the bottom. There is a Remove Filter button that you can click on as well, and that will remove any filters that you currently have in place. So before I jump into a few examples, I want to just point out down here at the bottom, this tutorial checkbox next to the Include Archived Studies. I have that checked right now. And what that is when you install ARM, it also installs some tutorial files as well. And those are files that we at GDM Solutions created, and they're installed. When you install ARM, they're stashed in a documents folder, and it has its own separate folder that's titled tutorials, so you know that they aren't real studies, but they're on your computer, and they're just a great way for you to follow along if you're watching any of our tutorial videos. We use one of these tutorial studies in those tutorial videos. So if you want to, if you're a hands-on person and you want to follow along, you can pull that up. It's a great way to practice a new ARM tool or feature. And they are named to tell you which tool or feature they're supposed to demonstrate. So if you look here, the edit trial map is about editing the trial map, obviously. We've got, a fungicide, we've got some that are on split plot, and there's also some, if you scroll way down, if you're looking at wanting to learn some summary across trials, we have some tutorial files that you can use when you're learning the summary across trials add-in. You can change these studies, these tutorial files, any way that you want. So you can mess around with them when you're learning a new tool or a feature. And then if you ever want to reset them, you simply go up to the Utilities menu and go down to Restore Original ARM Tutorial Studies. And that will reset all of those tutorial files. So they'll all go back to normal and you can use them all over again. So again, feel free to do whatever you want with those tutorial studies as you're learning some new skills in ARM. All right, well, I'm going to jump into some specific examples for searching and how to use the study list. And we'll work with this study grid down here at the bottom. So the first column in the study grid is the study ID. And that column is like a freeze pane there. It's always the first column there. It's set to be the first column. And the study ID is a generalization of the trial and the protocol ID. So your trial will have a protocol ID, or each study, each file will have a protocol ID and a study ID. And so you can see right here by study type, the column down here that delineates which ones are protocol and which ones are trial. There's lots of different columns here. So if you click on each one, you can see when I clicked on the study type column, the header there, it will automatically alphabetize by that column. It'll sort by that column, either ascending, or if I click it again, by descending. If you have specific columns that you use quite a bit, you can click and drag those over so that they are to the left, so they're easily accessible for you. So if my study type, maybe invest location is another column that I use quite often. I'm going to click and drag that column and bring it over to the far left so it's readily visible when I first open ARM. And once you click and drag and set these, they will stay there. So the next time you open up ARM, it'll be in the same position. By default, ARM uses this last open column. So you can easily find the last trial or the last protocol that you were working on. You can also, if you want to filter by a particular, so for example, if I wanted to filter by location, I find this Brookings, I can right click and say filter by Brookings, South Dakota, this location, and it will apply that filter for me. And I can right click and remove filter. And each time that I clear that filter, you can see down here at the bottom, there's a previous filters button. And so when I create those filters and then when I clear them, ARM remembers them and it creates a list for me. So I can click on this previous filters button and I'm not sure why it's way down at the bottom of that, you can't see it, but you can see that it created, when I filtered for that location, Brookings, South Dakota, it created that previous filter. So I can double click that and bring that back up. It will bring that back up for me. And if I scroll down, you can see I can just barely scroll there. I can go clear back to July. I used a filter. I can double click on that to apply that filter as well. So that's an easy way if you've filtered, done some searching before to find particular studies and you don't want to have to enter all that information back in again, you can quickly use that previous filters button to bring that filter back up and find those studies again. All right, so just some more examples here. If I go up to the filter section, if I want to filter for a particular trial year, so maybe I want to work with my trials that I created in 2019, I can type in the year 2019 and hit enter. Let's see. There we go. So I enter in that 2019 and you can see over the active filter here, it's telling me that out of those 62 studies that I have in my study list, 10 of them are from the year 2019. Some more options here in the quick filters. So if I wanted to do a range, I could use this filter for, and I could say a range from 2015 to say 2019. And it will bring up all of the studies that were created in that range of years. I can also, if I go back to filtering for that 2019, there's the everything except. If I, for some reason, the everything except is grayed out here, but if I were to click on that, then it would exclude the 2019 files. I'm not sure why that's not working correctly. There's also the empty blank field, so I can click on that one right now. So I'm clicked into the trial year and I've clicked on that empty blank fields. So what it has done is in my study here, it's showing me that out of my 62 studies, 8 of them, the trial year is blank. So I can open that up. And once it opens up this file for me, I can go to my header editor and see that, yep, my trial year is blank. So I can fill that in and then save it. And then another trick here to show everybody while we're in an actual study, when you want to close out of a study, use this black X up here in the menu bars. That will just close your study. I think it's probably sometimes just habit to go up to the far right corner and use the X up there. If you do that, you will close out of ARM entirely. So if you want to keep working in ARM and just close this study, use this black X in the menu bar. And so I've entered in that year and saved it. So now when I go back to my study list, and I am still filtering for the blank trial year field, that study no longer shows up. So if you're looking for a particular type of information, maybe it's your location. I'm going to remove the filter. Click in that location and click empty blank field. So maybe you want to make sure that the location is entered in for all of your studies. That's a quick way to find the studies that that information hasn't been entered, rather than having to look through all 62 studies. I just quick put in that filter and find the 15 studies that that information hasn't been entered in for yet. Okay, and now Matt gave me a quick tip on the everything except. I couldn't get that to work earlier, so I typed that year back in, and now if I clicked everything except, it will bring up all of the studies that were created in every year other than the 2019. So I can exclude that 2019 and bring up everything else. All right, another nice option here in the quick filters. I'm going to remove filter again. So if I type in a location here, you can see I typed in Brookings is saying no studies available for this current filter. If I go over to the quick filters here again on the right, there's the contains. So if I click on that contains, it's going to automatically enter in a wildcard on both sides of that Brookings that I entered in. And you can see now it pulls up 13 studies. So if you're not sure that you typed in something the exact same way every single time, using those wildcards is a good way to make sure that you get all of the studies that you're searching for. And so you can use that contains. You can also hand type in those wildcards too. So that's a great way to make sure that you're finding everything that you intended to find. And on the flip side, if you want an exact match, you click on the whole field, and that will require an exact match for the information that you typed in. Again, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, throw those in the chat and we will get them answered. So a few more things to show you, ways that you can use the study list. So right here, if I wanted to look for a particular treatment or product that we had been using, I can click on this gold box in any one of these fields. So I'm going to click on the gold box and the treatment name. And I'm going to look for just a couple of particular products that we've used in the past. So I'm going to go down and you can select one or more in this list. So I'm going to select two, the Super Stomp and the Sure Kill, and say, okay, and I'm including those in my search. So then it'll bring up 30 of those 62 studies we used those treatments in. And then maybe I want to narrow this down even more. The filters are cascading, so you can continue to add more filters to narrow down your search. I'm going to go to crop name here. So maybe I want to see how those products worked on our spring wheat and our winter wheat. So I can narrow that down even more. And you can see that I came up with 4 studies that we used on those treatments on those crops. And then maybe I want to provide this list of these studies to someone else. Way down in the bottom right, there's some buttons here. One of those is the clipboard button. And if you click on it, you can see there's a down arrow on that button because there's a couple different options for the clipboard. And one is the copy all, and that's the option that I am going to use. So I copied, when I hit that copy all, it's going to copy all of the information in the study grid here. So all of these columns, all that indexed information, it has copied. And then I can paste that into Excel. So I can bring it over here and show you. I pasted that into an Excel document. So now I can save this, send it off to a colleague if I want to. I can also, further manipulate the information. If I want to delete some columns out, I can do that. So that's a nice way to quickly copy information from your study grid. And the other is the copy map info. So I'll show you that here quick. So when I copy that map info, it is going to bring up batch geo here. And so this is, click in there and I'm going to copy in my map information there and say map my data. And this is a free service. I think you can pay for some licensing on it, but I'm just going to use the free, check unlisted and say save map. And it is going to email me a link to my map. And we actually already did this beforehand in preparation. So I'll bring that up. So here's a map that Matt had actually done in advance. So it emails you this. It's got the link there. So I will pull up that link and you can see it mapped out all of the trials that he had copied that information over from the study grid and put them on an interactive map. All right, and so I can click on each one of those and it has some information. It has the study ID in there. You can include other information as well. So if you wanted to include maybe a treatment name or the crop that it was dealing with, you can get that to show up here as well. You can pick and choose what you want to show up on this map. But that's a nice handy way to map out all of your trials. And again, we simply use the clipboard button down here at the bottom and copy map info in order to do that. And it automatically brought up that batch geo site. I didn't have to type that in. When you hit that copy map info, it'll automatically bring up whatever browser you have set to your default and bring up the batch geo website. All right, and one of our last things that I'm going to show you here is our rebuild button. And so we do have a question in the chat here. So it's asking if it used that the batch geo, it's asking if it mapped it from the city information or from the GPS location. And Matt, I haven't used batch geo a whole lot. Can you GPS coordinates? All right. So Matt confirmed that the batch geo uses the GPS coordinates from your trial to create that map. All right. So back to our study list here. The last function that I want to show you here is this rebuild button down in the bottom right. So I'm going to click, and I did exactly what I didn't want to do. So lesson for everyone here, don't use the rebuild function when you are in tutorial mode. It will not work there. And let's see if I can get it to, now ARM is going to be upset with me because I did that. Oh, and another question in the chat there. So why so many locations when the list only had 4? So I actually used to save time, so I didn't have to wait for that email to show up when I created that map. I used a map that Matt had already previously created from a different demonstration. So whatever he had searched for and used for that was a different list from what I had done. I just didn't want to sit and wait for that email to come through. So good question there. Good clarification there. All right. All right, so back to the rebuild. So make sure that you are not in you're not in tutorial mode. You want to be in regular ARM mode there when you do the rebuild. So now I'll click on that rebuild button again. Oh, but Matt, now it's telling me that it is starting the tutorial study list rebuild again, even though I'm not in tutorial mode again. Is there anything else that I needed to do since I made that mistake to restart? Will I need to close and reopen ARM if I did that? Reopen, okay. All right, I am going to close and reopen ARM quickly. It'll take just a second for me to get this back open. All right. So now I am not in tutorial mode, so I will push the rebuild button again and see if it'll work for me this time. All right, there we go. So it brought up the window here for rebuilding the study list. And so this rebuild function is also a pretty powerful tool. So as we said before, the study grid is every single ARM file that you have ever created or opened with your ARM license. ARM is going to remember that file, index it, and it's also going to remember the path of where that file is stored. And so if you want to, so you can see from the active filter here right now, since I'm out of tutorial mode, my study grid has 173 active studies, or 173 studies there. 168 of them are active. I've archived a few, so I've got quite a few studies in my study grid. So if I want to narrow that down, if I want to work with a particular group of studies and I don't want all the rest of them in my study list, I can use this rebuild function. And so I can go to this search specified path and then click on the browse button, and I can go to any folder that I want to rebuild my study list. So For instance, here, if I wanted to work with what's automatically pulling up here is the folder where we have stored some studies that we use with our ARM mobile demonstrations. So maybe I want to pull those up and I just want to be using those. Whatever folder you want, maybe you save your studies by year. So you're at the end of your research season, maybe you just want to have your study list with your 2022 studies so you can concentrate on closing out the year. Just browse, find whatever folder you want. You can also click this search subfolders, so that way if you have any subfolders within that folder that you chose, ARM will search those as well. And then you can choose your rebuild method down here at the bottom. So in this case, if I wanted to just work with my 2022 files, then I would click this clear existing study list and rebuild from search location. And so what ARM will do with that method is it will completely clear out everything that's currently in my study grid, and then it will repopulate that study grid with just the studies in the folder that I specified up here above. So that's one option. And we do have a question in the chat. So if you deleted a trial, can you find it this way? No, ARM is only able to find the trials that are still saved on your computer. So if you've deleted one, it won't reappear when you use this rebuild. And so another option with the rebuild study list, so you can, again, clear it out and pull out just studies that you want to concentrate on. Or if you have a study that for some reason isn't showing up in your study list that you've worked on before and you're not sure why it's there, you can do this search all known paths. And like I said before, ARM memorizes the path to every file that you've ever created or opened in ARM. And you can see here, it's listing all those known paths for my ARM license. So I have some ARM files that are saved on my hard drive. I've got some saved in cloud drives. So it's remembered all of those different paths. And I'm going to keep this search subfolders selected as well. And for this particular instance, I'm going to say update existing study list. So what it will do, instead of clearing out like this first method, it's going to keep everything that's currently listed in my study grid, in my study list, and it's going to go through and search all of these paths. And if it finds another study that isn't currently in my list, it will add it to my study list. So like I said, if you're missing a file, go to the search all known paths, update the existing study list, and ARM will search every place that you've ever saved any files, and we'll bring those in if it's missing one for some reason. Another way that you can use this rebuild function is if you if you're not the only one that works on a particular study file, if you have some colleagues that you're working with, a bunch of different people that you've been working on the same file and you've got it saved in a network drive, shared drive, or cloud drive, you can use this update information in the study list for studies that have changed since the last time you opened it. And so what it will do is it will go check those studies, and if anything has been updated, it will update the indexing here in your study list so you can see the latest information that has been entered in for those studies. And so once, whatever your purpose is for rebuilding, once you've selected your different options, then you can click OK, and it will start the rebuild process. And you can see down here in the bottom left, it says starting study list rebuild, please wait. And it will eventually here bring up a window to tell us the progress. And while you're waiting, you can continue to work in ARM. So you don't have to sit and wait for it to rebuild, to completely rebuild. If you have another file that you want to open, you can open that up and continue to work on that. And I brought this up on my other screen, so I'll drag this over here so you can see, shows you the progress of rebuilding the study list, and it could take several minutes depending on which option you chose in that previous screen. And so if you want to continue working, then you can just minimize this little window here and continue working in ARM. And you can see it found there's 49 files, and so it's working on updating those 49 files, bringing in anything that I might not have had in my current study list. Are there any other questions? I think I've showed you just about everything. So I just showed you the rebuild method. And so here you can see before I had, I think it was 173 files. Now you can see I have 221 files in my study list. I'm actually going to go back to that tutorial. Down in the bottom right where that rebuild button is, there's another button, the browse button, that you can click on. So if you know that there is a file in a particular place, then you can go look for that in a particular folder and open up a file to get it to show up in your study list. All right. I think I've gone through most of my examples. Matt, if you think I've forgotten something, like I said, this is a pretty powerful tool. There's so many different ways that you can use the study list. I'm sure I've forgotten a few different things. Okay, we have a question in the chat. When selecting more than one option, for example, in the treatment list, my only option is or, I can't do an and. So are you wondering if, so like the Super Stomp and the Sure Kill, are you wanting to find only studies that use both of those as treatments? Yes. All right. Matt, do you have an answer for us there?
I'll try my voice here.
Okay.
Click into that box then, and the vertical line in between Super Stomp and Sure Kill, change that to an and. I have no idea if this will work or not. Actually, the ampersand symbol instead of and. Okay. I don't know if it'll work. It might be kind of more something that ST can do since you're combining things. Doesn't look like it likes it.
Okay. Part of the problem might be maybe I should my tutorials. So since I accidentally hit rebuild in tutorial and I canceled it, it only brought back two of my two of my studies. So that might be part of the issue there. Because yeah, when I go to tutorial mode. There's only those two there. Let's maybe try.
I'm skeptic it would work. I think it is probably just designed for the or. I'll try it on my computer quick though.
Okay.
But for sure you'd have to hack it at the very most. Because most cases, it has to be an or, because there's only one value, but in the treatments it's different.
Okay. We have another question here. When mapping the study spread in a country, for example, will the WAV format I recorded the GPS coordinates interfere in the mapping results? Matt, I'm gonna ask you for your opinion on that one.
It shouldn't. I think ARM saves the GPS coordinates internally the same way, and then it just displays your coordinates depending on your option. So I think the way you enter it doesn't matter. If you entered in your trial one way and I did it differently, but we both had those files in the list, ARM will save the coordinates, internally the same way, so it'll be treated fairly.
Great questions. Thank you, everybody. All right, we have another question here. When copying the study list to the clipboard in future ARM versions, is it possible to add more columns? Like not only first and last application, but between for multiple application fungicide trials. Also, the pest code column is limited to only one pest, or any tips to get more information while copying to the clipboard.
I would say for the examples listed, we're kind of limited in just the way this table functions. So it would be hard for us to create those specific ones. If you had a field, a regular field in a trial that you wish was on the list, you can send us an email and we can consider if we can add it or not. But the ones described with, dealing with many applications and pests, those repeating sections are a lot harder. Kind of better for like an ATD. You can get sophisticated with a full-fledged database. But just within the ARM study list, we're just kind of limited a little. And I did not get the "and" to work in Carolyn's question, so I think it's just an "or" that you'd have to use, unless you went to ST to get fancy with querying treatments.
Great questions. Any other questions? Well, we will stick around for a few more minutes for anybody that has any more questions. Otherwise, we can end a little bit early today.